I remember spending the whole weekend debating whether I should cut down on my drinking on the weekend or cut down during the week. And since I couldn't decide, I didn't do either.
Basically, my life was a huge lie.
The officer who's arresting me looking at me and saying, you know, young lady, most of the girls I see like you end up hooked on heroin and prostituting on the street.
I would say that growing up in an alcoholic household, my mother was an alcoholic, was absolutely the most dark experience of my life.
I really believed that I didn't have a problem with drugs and alcohol. I mean, at that moment when she asked me that question, I was like, no, I don't. And she said, well, then what is your problem? And I said, I don't know.
Oftentimes I think back, if our family was going through that today, how much different it would have been if we'd have seen something like Recovery Now and had a place to go.
There are two things anybody who wants to be more helpful to an addict or alcoholic ought to do. Number one is educate yourself about the disease of addiction and alcoholism. And number two is to get help and support for yourself in dealing with this problem. If you looked it up in a medical dictionary, a disease would be listed as the dysfunction of an organ with an identifiable progression of symptoms. With alcoholism and drug addiction, the organ that we're talking about is the central nervous system, your brain and spinal cord, which controls how you think, how you feel, and how you act. So when people put alcohol or drugs into their body, what happens is any drug that affects your central nervous system makes it dysfunctional, whether you're getting it from a doctor or whether you buy it on the street. That's how drugs work. Now for some people, what happens when that dysfunction happens is it leads to an experience, a very pleasurable experience for them, that then leads to a progression of symptoms going on.
Allison, in 9th grade, said to me on a Monday morning, said, you know what, John, you're different than everybody else when you drink. Because I drank some wild turkey the weekend before at a school dance, and I'd passed out in McDonald's and had kept drinking when everybody else had stopped drinking. She said, well, you're different than, and I remember thinking, shut up, like, what are you talking about?
Did I know it was alcoholism? Didn't know that it was alcoholism. Wasn't sure what was wrong. I just knew I had to drink.
So, to understand addiction is going to be the thing that is going to make you helpful to the addict or alcoholic. When what you believe is firm, then how you behave in dealing with a situation gets firm and you know what to do. What happens when you deal with alcoholism and drug addiction is what you believe gets shaken. And as it's going back and forth, then what you begin to behave in ways back and forth and not sure how to deal with it, and you feel uncomfortable with yourself as you're trying to deal with that.
I couldn't see what everybody else was seeing, that she was out of line and inappropriate in her language. And I saw this child that I adored. I saw this beautiful little girl who had the most amazing blue eyes and smile, and that's where I would go.
To begin to think about it as a disease, what's going to happen is you're going to begin to change how you interact with your loved one. They are sick people who need to get well, not bad people who need to get good.
I had a dad in recovery at that time, and I had been told many times that I was a drunk and that I had a drug problem, but I thought, what are the chances of having two alcoholics in one family? Because my dad was the drunk, not me.
I thought that they had a problem. I thought the problem was theirs, not mine. Like I said, I didn't think there was anything wrong with my behavior, with what I was doing.
When people are dealing with addiction, they always want to bring it back to it somehow about these underlying problems. And as long as you continue to do that, guess what? How can anybody, get well from this disease? Because we all have other problems in our life. Okay? I mean, it's just this great cop-out, that somehow these other problems are causing it.
When I got kicked out of school, it was the dean's fault. And when I got kicked off of fishing boats, you wouldn't have wanted me on those boats with the kind of people that were running them.
School, let's get him in to see a tutor and get a tutor, and let's get him into these college prep courses with this, with this agency so that he can prepare himself for school. And let's, send him to a psychologist because obviously he's having these behavioral problems.
My home life, it wasn't a happy time. I was in a stressful job and some of the classic excuses.
What you'll find is there are lots of people who have those very same problems, Okay? Lots of people have those problems who don't use alcohol and drugs. And there are lots of people who have those problems who do use alcohol and drugs. So what's the difference? Why do some people who have those problems use drug and some people don't? It's because they're addicts and alcoholics, because they have this disease. When you don't understand addiction, you get sucked into trying to deal with all the other problems in their life, thinking that that'll somehow help them not use drugs the way they do or drink the way they do. And you end up driving yourself nuts trying to solve the other problems, and then they don't change their drinking habits.
Everything was about, treating, the symptoms of my disease, all the unmanageability and craziness in my life. It was about trying to clean that stuff up, always having money troubles, let's help them with some money. It never was about, besides the time, that they, when I went to treatment, it had never really been about, about my use of alcohol and drugs. It was about all the other things.
They were trying to take care of me, is what it comes down to, until they got so tired that they were willing to do something else.
The reality is everybody has all sorts of problems in life. That's just a given. We all deal with all sorts of different things. We're all handed our own basket of things to deal with. If we can keep this disease separate from those other problems, we have a whole lot better chance of getting well. When we can view alcoholism as a disease and people having other problems and make that separation, what happens is what we believe gets firm and how you deal with it gets clear. You don't deal with all those other problems as such. Yeah, you help people deal with other problems. I think we all have to deal with them all the time. But you keep focused on, okay, here's this disease. We treat this disease and help people understand it and do what they need to do to help deal with it. Let me give you an example that kind of sums this up. If we were having a party and one of our guests has heart disease, and as a symptom of their heart disease, all of a sudden has a heart attack and is falling over, knocking stuff down, hitting the floor. How do we look at that person? Scared, concerned. We're on the phone calling for help. 911, boom. Okay, change the scenario. Now one of our guests is alcoholic and suffering a symptom of their alcoholism is stumbling, knocks into the same stuff. How do we look at him or her? Angry, disgusted, why don't you shape up? Who has a better chance of getting well? Okay. When you are focusing and understanding that alcoholism and drug addiction is about a disease, that your loved one is sick, then it gets clear on how you go about trying to help them.
The first intervention that I was a part of was on a boyfriend. I was 18 years old. He was 17, and he was addicted to marijuana.
We did an intervention on my daughter. She was 15 years old at the time.
And he said to me that if this is what a friendship is to you, then I want no part of this. And that was one of the first times anybody was truthful enough to me to tell me that my behavior wasn't working.
She was very soft, and she hit me right in my heart, and that was really a turning point.
Intervention, in simplest terms, my best definition of intervention is sharing in a loving, caring manner how you're feeling and asking for what you want. And really, if you think about it, that's the basis of any healthy relationship. With addiction, though, what happens is you probably tried that at some point in the process, and your loved one, because of the nature of their illness, didn't respond very well. They don't play by those rules. They got angry or they isolated and pulled away, and so what happens is you stop interacting with them in that fashion, and then as you stop interacting in a healthy way with them, you start not feeling good about yourself. You hear it lots of times that a properly done intervention is never a failure. I mean, intervention isn't a failure because intervention really is about you taking steps to take care of yourself in dealing with the problem that you have.
It's that oxygen mask analogy. We've all flown on airplanes, and this flight attendant gets up there and shows you how to use your oxygen mask. And I think that's it with this disease, is if you don't put your own oxygen mask on and start breathing, then you can't help your husband, you can't help your friend, you can't help your sister, your child, whoever it is that's suffering.
Alcohol makes the user insane and everybody around him. And then we try to make a sane system out of it.
One thing that people do that is actually can kind of get, the addict on defensive is you approach them usually when you're angry. They've done something just recently and you're angry. And so you approach them with, you did this, blah, 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 and you need to do blah, 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 blah. Okay? So you approach them angry. How many of you like to get approached by somebody who's angry? None of you. I mean, you get approached with somebody who's angry at you, you get defensive immediately. The second mistake we make when we approach addicts and alcoholics is we try to convince them that they have a problem. Okay? We come at them as, can't you see you have this problem and you've got to do this, and here we try to convince them. How many of you like to be convinced you've got a problem?
They were very emotional. I was angry. And I think I was angry because drugs and alcohol were getting taken away from me. I remember thinking that I should just tell them to, goodbye, go away.
My business partner was said basically, are you okay? And of course I said, sure, I'm okay.
I think the first time my mom maybe said anything, or my dad said anything to me about my drinking, I think I put a hole in a wall leading into our kitchen, that I was so angry. I just instantly, and I imagine that put them back on their heels and they weren't going to talk about that again, and I don't know if that was a conscious thought on their part, but I know we didn't talk about that again for a really long time.
Their brain's not working right and they don't think they need help. They might think that they need to change something, control it a little better or something, but they don't necessarily think they need help. They think the alcohol and drugs is probably helping them as opposed to the thing that's causing the problem. Let me give you an example. Say you come upon an accident and there's been a motorcycle driver and he has gotten in an accident, and you can visibly see he's kind of walking around dazed, not really in real good condition, but he's saying, oh, I'm okay, you don't need to call anybody. You see that and you know it's worried, and so you get on your phone and you call anyway and you get some help for him there. Addiction's kind of the same way. They can be telling you, I don't need help, everything's fine. But unfortunately, because of the nature of the disease they have, their brain isn't working right.
Like the interventionists say, it's not necessarily the act of the intervention, but other things intervene on people's disease, and we were lucky enough to have that intervene with him.
Interventions can be things like getting arrested by the police, you getting angry, friends not hanging with them anymore, anything that's going on in their life, they're getting sick, all the things that are going on in their life that are negative consequences as a result of their use are types of interventions. They're all interventions. The type of intervention we're talking about today is going to be where you specifically go and ask, hey, I'm concerned, I've got a problem here, I need some help for you, would you do this for me?
They called my primary care physician and said that they thought I had a drinking problem, and would the doctor please talk to me?
When I got sober was when my mom and my family, finally drew a firm bottom line and said, we can't watch you die anymore. We just can't do it. And we're sorry, we love you, but when you're ready to get help, we're here for you.
My brother said to me at the airport, because he'd gone to some family education meetings when I'd been in treatment before about the disease of alcoholism, and he finally had gotten to the point, probably the only family member that had gotten to that point, said to me, don't bother calling me until you have a year of sobriety this time. And that, I think, is 80% of I just went, whoa. They're going to give up on me if I don't do this time. I need to do it this time.
There are 4 levels of intervention that you can try that can be a way for you to ask your loved one to get help. The lowest level of intervention is something some of you might have tried already, but maybe not in exactly the way I'm going to tell you. That is going as an individual to the person and saying, I'm concerned, I have a problem. Will you come talk to somebody with me about this, or will you enter this treatment program? Okay. When you approach somebody from a perspective of, I've got a problem, will you help me with this? People are a whole lot more likely to help you deal with a problem than are they going to be to you convincing them that they have a problem.
And I think that anybody who's in a relationship with somebody who's using has a right to intervene.
As long as you try something, as long as you tell them. I did make it a point to tell him that I was concerned, that I was worried about how much using he was doing and that I didn't think it was right, and it scared me.
But she was very loving about it and very non-threatening and very no pointing fingers.
I often think of him having given me the gift of truth, one of the first people to give me that gift of truth, which I believe that truth ultimately led me to my recovery.
The second level of intervention is an informal intervention, which is a group of people all going and once again keeping it as simple as possible, saying, we are all concerned, we would like you to do either come talk to somebody, a professional with us about this, or will you please enter this treatment program. Both of these, do not try if you think you're going to get angry. Do not try to convince them or get into an argument about whether they have a problem or not. They will try to do that. They will try to get you into an argument about whether they have a problem or not and why you think they have one. Don't go there. Okay? Move up to a formal intervention, which is the third level. In a formal intervention, you actually have a professional there that helps guide you through the whole process. It's what people often think about when they think about interventions, though most people have sort of a preconceived notion that it's kind of a adversarial, ganging up on the person kind of process. And I really want to stress that any type of intervention is a loving, caring, sharing how you're feeling and asking for what you want. The first step is going to be gathering information and making sure that the team is as firm as possible in understanding the disease and knowing why they're doing what they're doing. So we're going to get you educated. We're going to also have you start looking at some of the ifs, ands, or buts. What are the reasons why they think they can't go to treatment, and beginning to brainstorm among the group as to how can you sort of take care of some of those things. If they're saying, well, I can't go because of work, you might want to be contacting work and finding out, how can we make this go as smoothly as possible? What about this? What about that? They're not going to go because of. You're going to be looking at how can we as a group start handling some of those things to make it as slippery of a slope to get them into treatment. And finally, everybody's going to write 2 letters. These are going to be letters that will be read at the intervention. The first letter is going to be a letter that says, I'm here because I love you and I'm concerned about you. And any other emotionally connecting information that you have. Our wedding day was the happiest day of my life. The day you were born, I couldn't, imagine it being any better. Anything that our fishing trips when we were kids were the greatest, Dad. Anything that really connects you with that person. Followed by documentation of why you believe there's a problem and that you believe the problem is about the alcohol or drugs, not about them.
You showed up over an hour late, visibly drunk. You were rude, you were embarrassing. Your behavior made me feel angry, frustrated. I know this isn't you. I love you dearly, but I hate what you're like when you're drunk. I want you to get better. Will you please go into treatment today?
The first letters are going to then end with, will you please enter treatment today? The second letter then is going to be, I'm sorry I have to be reading this letter. If I'm reading this letter, it means you're unwilling to get help at this time. Since you're unwilling to get help at this time, these are the things I need to do to take care of myself.
If I'm reading this letter, you have said you won't go into treatment today. This makes me so very sad. I can't spend time with you at all until you decide to go into treatment. I will not be there for you. I will not support your disease. I won't let you crash at my house when you have nowhere else to go. I will not be a part of your life ever again until you seek treatment. I will always be there for you if you decide to seek help in going into recovery. Will you please enter treatment today?
What the letters really want to say is, hey, we realize that we've been dealing with this process in a way that we're uncomfortable. It's kind of like saying, we realize we're here today to tell you realize we're riding on your bus and you're driving the bus and we're in the back saying, hey, your bus is going to crash. We think the drugs are going to ruin your life. It's going to be, blah, blah, blah. It's going to be terrible and awful. Get off this bus. Get off this bus. Get off it. Get off it. And we're sitting in the back just yelling and screaming at you about what to do and how it's going to happen. But any chance we had to get off the bus, we haven't gotten off. We've stayed on the bus and just kept yelling at you, telling you we thought it was going to crash. But by us staying on the bus, we're sort of sending you a message that we believe it's not going to crash. So what we did with the first letter was say, here's why we think this bus is going to crash. And with the second letter, we're saying, we're starting a new bus. We would like you to join us on our bus because we really do believe your bus is going to crash. And we want you to know that the door to our bus is open for you to join us now, hopefully, and any time in the future if necessary.
Yeah, I mean, my parents weren't giving up on me. They were giving me a clear choice, that they weren't going to continue to support my addiction. That, by allowing me to live in their home, they were making things more comfortable for me, to continue to die.
Basically told me, go to treatment or we don't want it. We can't be involved with you. And that's the reason that I went to treatment, and it's almost 4 years later. And, I'm in recovery.
The second stage of this process is going to be reviewing all the homework, seeing whether you've got it all done. You got treatment programs picked out and beds available, that we have all the T's crossed, I's dotted on all the ifs, ands, or buts that you guys have been looking into in terms of getting ready and planned for getting the intervention done. We finished up reviewing the homework, which leads us to the actual intervention itself. The intervention is going to start out with the interventionist, approaching the person and pretty much saying, hey, we're all here today because we're concerned about your alcohol and drug use, and we would like you to enter treatment today. Would you be willing to do that? We're going to approach them with courtesy and dignity and just say, this is why we're here. And at that, people are going to say yes or no. And believe it or not, about 25% of the time people say okay right then before, even reading the letters. If that's the case, we save up the letters for later because we're going to need them when they're in treatment. We're not going to use them until we have to. So if they say okay, then they're going to go right then. If they say no, I'm not willing to go, then what happens is the interventionist would say, well, we prepared some things we'd like to share with you. Would you be willing to listen to them? They will once again say yes or no. Generally, if people are listening to us still at that point and we encourage them, it's real important to listen to us, they will. Then we will generally sit down and in a planned out fashion, starting with the first letters, read the letters one by one. First person reads, asks the person, will you enter treatment? Second person, third person, all the way through. We will have planned out ahead of time who's going to go first, who's going to go last, so that we're kind of ready for that with the most impactful letters first and last. At the end of that, what's going to happen is we will then approach the person as the interventionist. The interventionist would approach the person and sort of work them a little bit about why not? Why aren't you willing to go? The three responses that generally come up, number one, they get angry sometimes, but we can moderate that by the people who are at the intervention. They won't get angry if they're people who haven't seen them get real angry, because they'll want to try to convince everybody that they're really got their act together and that you're the crazy one. Or they'll kind of go into self-pity. And the most common one is they just kind of go sort of unfeeling, stoic. They try to shut down, just kind of go away. So once that's been done, the interventionist then is going to go to the second letters and have the group read the second letters one by one. And the second letter is going to lay out, this is what this other road's going to be. We're starting our own bus. We want you to join us, but we can't keep staying on your bus. And one by one, we lay that out. And the more dramatic this change is, the more the group has gotten to the point in their own intervention process to say, we're not willing to have this disease in our life.
I think that my brother I had gone to treatment years previous to the final treatment that got me well, and he had gone to a lot of the alcohol education classes, and he someplace along the line had heard the message that at some point I needed to get uncomfortable enough and hear that they were done with me so that I would pay attention.
Hardest thing she's ever had to do in her entire life, she says. I mean, she said, she knew she loved me so much that she had to do that for me, but was the hardest thing she's ever had to do in her entire life.
It's important to remember, if you want to be sharing information like this in a formal intervention, if you want to be laying down bottom lines to people, it's very important to have an interventionist there to help you. Because you will most likely, if you don't have an interventionist there to help you, what will happen is you will once again get angry and mad and be threatening them, and then the addict or alcoholic will look at you once again like, this is why I use, because you're such a blah, 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 how you're handling it, they will take as offensive. If you are behaving in a way that you feel comfortable and we can help you in that guided process, then you have a good chance of them not being able to blame you anymore. It's not about you then. After reading both letters, if the person is still saying, oh, no way, I'm not going to go, then what happens is the group at that moment, at that time, starts doing what they said they were going to do on their second letters. Okay? You begin on your own bus with the door open for them to come join you in the future.
It's something that needs to be done, though. You know, there's no way I would be here if it weren't for my family stopping and saying something to me.
Oh, she saved my life by doing that. I mean, she absolutely saved my life.
Well, if it weren't for those folks, left to my own devices, I don't think I would have gotten here.
So to summarize, the 4 steps to the intervention process was gathering the information, getting people the homework, going over the homework, making sure it's all done, the actual intervention itself, and then the final step is going over with the group what happened. If they went to treatment, this is how you support them in treatment. If they don't go to treatment, here's what to expect, here's what to do. And the final form of intervention, it's follow through and do what you said you're going to do in your intervention level. It's quit trying to fix them. Okay? Addicts and alcoholics, when we have other people around us trying to fix our problem for us, guess what? We don't have to worry about it. We know you're on the job and you'll figure it out. When we can quit, when you quit doing that job, the addict or alcoholic has to do it for themselves. And it's a very powerful tool when people really do follow through and take care of themselves, do the things they need to do, and not be focused on how do I fix this other person. So that brings us back to our kind of main point, that an intervention properly done is never a failure, because you have walked through dealing with the problem you're dealing with in a way that you can feel comfortable with yourself dealing with it, and you've got a very high chance that your loved one will also get help.
I feel like they probably did for me something that I could never have done for myself. I don't know what my life would be like if I continued to use. My life is incredible now, and I am absolutely grateful.
And I thank her. I saw her last year, and I hug her, and I thank her, and I mean, I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it.
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, without her, talking to me that night on the phone, without her, continuing to, say when you want some help, I'm willing to do whatever. Without her, then extending that help when I was ready for it, I wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation with you.
Thank you for saving my life. That was pretty huge. And like I said before, whether she continues in recovery, none of us know, but she's alive today, and we're together and intact as a family, and I'm not attached to her emotional roller coaster, and that's huge for me.